Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone attending the Planning Committee meeting today, especially those in the public gallery and anyone watching the meeting via the webcast. To the members of public in the gallery, I would like to remind you that this planning meeting is being broadcast live over the internet, so there is no need for any other filming of the meeting to take place. This meeting is available to view online now and in the future. Committee members, please be aware that we are all on camera and you may be visible on screen when people around you are speaking. And please remember to speak clearly into your microphones. We welcome the use of the Welsh language at meetings. I have had no request for people to speak Welsh today, so this meeting is conducted in English only. Please can all mobile phones and other noisy devices be put on silent. If there is an emergency alarm, please follow the green signs and go to the ground floor of the Civic Centre car park. Thank you. I'm going to ask the officers to introduce themselves now, starting with you, Polly, please.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Polly Ennis. I'm the solicitor with the council.
Rachel Beale from Democratic Services.
Richard Lewis, Head of Planning. Paul Whelan, Highway Development Control.
Claire Hall, Senior Planner, Development Management.
Norman Jones, Team Leader, Applications.
Thank you. Right. We'll start the agenda. Item 1, attendance and apologies. Are there any apologies, Rachel?
I've received apologies from Councillor Ron Burnett and Councillor Jason O'Connell.
Thank you. Do members know of any other apologies? If you do, just put them on the list when the attendance register goes around. Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Over to you, Polly.
I'd remind members that you need to complete the declaration of interest form in the attendance register folder if you're declaring an interest in any application. The following interests have been declared to me. In agenda item 5, Councillors Stuart Ashley and Councillor Faye Jones declare a personal non-prejudicial interest in agenda item 5 as members of Cumbrae Community Council, which has been consulted on the application. Are there any other declarations to be made?
I'm the ward councillor for both these on the agenda.
Thank you. Item 3, minutes of the planning meeting held on the 15th of January. They're on pages 3 to 7, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6 and 7. Do you agree they're a true record? Thank you. Any comments you want to make or questions about it? You're okay with it? No? Okay then, thank you. Yes, your interest has been declared. Polly has declared your interest, Councillor. Yeah, that's okay. Right. Item 4. This is notification of appeal decision. And the appeal reference was 18/appeal/18/reference, and it was site address land at Addit Walk, Pontnewydd, Cumbrae. And this appeal relates to the council's decision to refuse planning permission for the construction of 9 dwellings. And as you see, the appeal was dismissed, and this is for our information only. So any comments members would like to make? Yes, Steve?
Being the ward councillor, I'd like to say a statement about this particular development. I'd like to first say what is that common sense prevailed and the inspector turned down Brown Evans' appeal on Addit Walk. First of all, I would like to thank all members of this committee for supporting me in keeping Addit Walk as an open space. To our MP, AMs and to Claire Hall particularly, who help us through the appeal process and also with Councillor Anastasiou. As originally, as officers, they recommended this for approval, but as members, we turned this down regarding, the open space. The community of West Ponley and Upper Cumran, I would like to thank who stood up to be counted in safeguarding this open space for future generations and writing into the Planning Inspectorate. Lastly, to Brunel, who are community housing, if listened to the community regarding Added Walk, that they wanted to protect this open space, it demonstrates their lack of listening to the community. The vast waste of resources, time and cost to fight this appeal could have been of better use with the monies for other building schemes for people facing homelessness. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Steve. The appeal was dismissed, as we all know now. So that. Do you all agree to note the information? Thank you. Go to item 5 on the agenda. Planning application 18/P/0727 FUL. The proposal is for demolition of the Yew Tree Public House, construction of 11 dwellings, parking area for existing retail units and associated works. And the site address is Yew Tree Inn, Mindy Way, Pontnewydd, Cwmbran. There was a planning committee inspection of the site on the 27th of November, and the report of the inspection is with your planning report. So it's over to Claire Hall now, she will present the application. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Chair. Just some minor updates to the report. Welsh Water, in their response to the reconsultation, picked up an additional issue in terms of proximity to a water main. I think that relates to the area of the proposed parking for the shops. So there's just an additional advisory note needed just to make the developers aware of their obligations. It's a standard wording that they would engage with Welsh Water on their standard conditions for working in proximity to water mains. And the applicants have asked us to look at the wording of condition 16, mainly to do with the phasing of the development so that some demolition can proceed in advance of any other works. The recommendation is unchanged because that does allow for minor alterations to conditions, providing that officers are satisfied with that. That would be something we would look at as part of the negotiations on the 106 if members were minded to approve the recommendation. So this is the Yew Tree Public House. That's the view looking up Maindy Road. That's the view looking down. This is the area of open space that is proposed to be provided for additional parking to serve the shops. And that's the pub. These are the mature trees that are referenced in the report, but they are actually outside of the application site boundary and within the council's ownership. So the pub at the moment stands in this sort of area here. So the proposal is to demolish the public house, and obviously construct a new access road into the site with the development facing both Maindy Road, Maindy Way and Maindy Wood Rise. So it addresses the sort of public facing side of the site with all the parking and incidental bin storage, etc., being behind the buildings. And this is the area of open space where it's proposed to provide additional parking to serve the shops. This is the street sections, just to show the difference in height of the buildings, really. Obviously the shops are only single storey. The developments are predominantly two-storey to reflect the adjoining built form, but the flats do actually go up to almost, it's not quite 3 storeys, it's sort of 2.5, but that's to address the corner and to sort of make a feature on that corner of the site. And these are the layout plans. So there's one 3-bedroom house 2 two-bedroom houses and 8 one-bedroom flats, which is what has been agreed with our housing department as to the needs in the local area. That's it.
Thank you, Claire. Any questions? Steve?
First of all, I'd like to ask, with it being a bit secluded, how are we looking to do the lighting to make sure it's illuminated, you know, for the residents to walk round? Because of the antisocial behaviour, I'm concerned about safety. That's the first one. And the other thing, reading the report, I see there's one space less in the development, but the highway officer is happy with that. But the new green on the side, which is going to be used for parking, who is going to police that? Because the parking around this area is particularly tremendous. It's very, very difficult to park at times. So if the shops are having this for parking, how are we going to be policing this? I mean, the shops, with the parking with the UT, which they're leasing at the moment, you know, if we don't get the parking situation right, these shops can suffer and end up closing, and then we would lose these within the community. So we need to get this right.
Thank you, Chair. Just on those 3 points, with the street lighting safety issue, there is a condition recommended at condition 6, which would also overlap with the adoption process of that access for street lighting to illuminate that area. In terms of the policing of the parking, it would be the land is owned by Bronavon. It wouldn't necessarily be policed by the council. My understanding is that the shops are benefiting from the parking spaces to the pub at Bronavon's offering, really. There's no requirement for them to provide parking, but obviously as part of the pre-application consultation that Bronavon did with the community, that was identified as an issue, so they're proposing additional parking as compensation, but certainly from a planning point of view there's no requirement for them to do that. And in terms of the parking provision for the development, the 1 space shortfall was the original layout plan that was submitted. That was actually remedied with the amended plan, so that it is fully compliant and there is no shortfall. So the scheme is compliant with the car parking standards for the development.
Okay, Steve?
But what I'm trying to say to you, the car park right behind where the doctors is usually crammed full of people for the surgery and the hall. These additional parking spaces is going to have an impact on the community because it'll be filled by residents along that road. So,
does the Highways Officer want to come in? Thank you.
Councillor, I think what we normally try to do is to look for parking provision for the particular planning application that we have before us. Notwithstanding, I agree that parking is an issue everywhere throughout the borough. What we've tried to do here is we recognise that there could be an issue with the shops, and this came up in a public consultation exercise that actually Bronavon did. They actually went to did a large consultation exercise with the public, and from that came an issue regarding car parking provision for the shops. So what they did, which they wouldn't specifically have to do, they did provide additional car parking space near the shops as part of this application, and it's probably about, I would have said, about 8 spaces that they can get there, which compensates for the car parking spaces that they informally used within the area within the U-Tree pub. So my view is that there's car parking provision for the development itself, which is the application you have before you. There's additional car parking that they have gone a long way to provide as part of that public consultation exercise that was there. And I do agree with you that car parking is an issue. in areas like Pontynewydd and areas of Oakfield. It is throughout the borough. But what we can't do is to get individual planning applications to totally address parking issues across the board, but we do try where we can to get some improvements. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Stuart, next.
Wrong release. I'd like to just make one comment, which don't take it the wrong way. This borough, in The Guardian a few weeks ago, has lost more public houses than any other borough in Wales. In this particular case, I suspect the ward councillors don't mind that because it's always been a bit of a problem. But I don't want that to become a trend any more than it has. I make that comment because it's actually something this planning committee we're well aware of. In this case, I think replacing it with social housing that we dearly need is probably a better outcome. I make that comment because I was quite astounded when I read that Guardian article. I only make that comment because I think it needs to be flagged up with a lack of public houses, which are our big establishments, and replacing them is quite common. But in this case, I think it's a better outcome for the ward councillors. Not always get my support on that one, but the other aspect of this is, it's going to go on to one of my favourite subjects, was trees. And I'm glad to see the retention of the big mature trees that we saw there. And after last week's biodiversity report, I'm wondering whether there's any more, I looked through this and wonder whether there was any more suggestion of putting more in there, because what our biodiversity support, talking to our partners, which is Bonavon, whether we can squeeze some more biodiversity in there, because we've got a lot of suggestions about that, and this site is relatively open if you look at it, and it would be nice to see some hedges, some more tree planting, etc., to support those trees that are already on there. I make that suggestion because that's something that came into my mind when we were looking at that. The other aspect of this report, it mentions bats, and I would like to ask the officers, are there bats on there, and if there are bats on there, what will we do about their mitigation? Because obviously bats are a problem if you plan it and you develop it, and we've had it elsewhere in the borough. It's just a question.
Right, thank you, Claire.
Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. If I take each of those issues in turn. In terms of the loss of the pub, if you look to the top of page 32, it does, there is a local development plan policy, CF3, which is very much geared towards retention of community facilities, and there is a quite a robust and thorough set of criteria that has to be going through before we would accede to losing a community facility, and that exercise has been done to your officer's satisfaction. They've exhausted other options in terms of making that building and that site available for alternative community uses, and we're satisfied based on proximity to other public houses in the area and the lack of take-up for community facilities on this site that we're okay in terms of the policy requirements to release it for housing. In terms of the trees, obviously you've pointed out that the mature trees, the three in the middle, are outside the site and will be protected as part of the development. In terms of opportunities for increasing biodiversity and planting on the site, it is difficult when you're dealing with a brownfield site that's potentially contaminated, and it's all very hard surfaced at the moment, but the proposed layout plan does allow for pockets of soft planting, which would include possibly some hedging along some of the key boundaries, and you'll see from the report that there's a requirement for a more detailed landscaping scheme to be drawn up, and certainly we can communicate to Bonavon the desire to increase habitat as much as possible as part of that. So we are taking advantage of limited opportunity, I would say, for soft planting on what is a very hard surfaced sort of brownfield site, really. So there's that. In terms of bats, there was a full report done in 2016, which was updated last year in terms of the position on bats. It's not thought that there are any bats present, but one of the recommendations of the ecology report which is included at recommended condition 4 for recommendations, does obviously require care to be taken during the carrying out of the works if any obviously are discovered during the course of either demolition or site preparatory works. Then obviously requirements under the Wildlife and Countryside Act kick in anyway, and the developers are obviously obliged to comply with that. So all being told, our ecologist is happy based on the information that's been submitted that there's no reason for us to withhold consent for the site to be redeveloped on bats.
Thank you, Claire. Do you want to come back in, Stuart?
Just very quickly, thank you for that detailed reply. It would be good if that thing, because that particular site I know well, because funnily enough it's one of my favourite routes up to one of my favourite pubs. It is quite a hard site, and you're right about the hard standing there. And if you put a new building in, something in there, landscaping, hedge, that sort of thing, to soften it and give that biodiversity would be actually quite advantageous, and anybody's going to live there. Because one of the things, if you walk that site quite often, I used to do it all the time for about 3 years when I was at schools up there, it's a lot of runoff on that site, tremendous amount. So that was one of my concerns about it. If you're in the middle of a rainstorm on that particular shopping site, it runs there. And obviously if you've got biomediation and grass and hedges and things, it would actually soften it quite considerably from the point of view of landscaping. So no, that does sound quite good if they can do that.
Well, the layout plan that obviously is subject of this application does clearly show sort of soft planting areas to the key frontages, really, as well as pockets within the site itself. So that would form the basis of any more detailed landscaping scheme which would specify species, mix, that sort of thing.
Thank you, Claire. You're okay now, Stuart?
Yeah.
Right. Janet next.
Thanks, Chair. My question really was again on the landscaping, and I realised that the officer would prefer a more physical linkage with the soft landscape areas. How amenable are Bronavon to cooperating with Torfaen Council to do this?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah. I've read that the landscape officer would prefer a more physical linkage between the soft landscape areas and the Torfaen-owned land with the trees. How amenable are Bronavon, to working together to achieve?
I think there's two issues there. The landscape officer is looking at it from what we call a green infrastructure point of view, and it's that sort of biodiversity linking areas together so that wildlife can go from one site to the other. I think there has to be a balance, a pragmatic balance between what can be achieved, certainly on brownfield sites. It's different on greenfield sites where your starting point is your biodiversity and you're taking away. With this, there is no biodiversity habitat whatsoever on that site at the moment, and whatever we put in is better than what we've got at the moment. I mean, there are areas of sort of grassed area that are shown on the indicative layout that are adjacent to the trees, and they are, like I said, pocketed through the site. You're not going to get a direct linkages because obviously there's buildings in the way, but it's that sort of stepping stone arrangement for wildlife where they land on the trees and they go into the garden and they fly off. You've got the major area of open space on the opposite side of the road. So I think it's not a question of being unwilling. I think it's about balance between the realities of when you're dealing with a site like this, how much you can achieve. There is some connectivity. I think it's probably not as much as our landscape officer would like to achieve, but we have to balance that with other issues in terms of the development as a whole.
Thanks, Claire.
Thank you. Gwen is next on there.
Good evening. Reading through it, the one thing that does concern me is this shopkeeper. Now, I haven't read through all he said. It's not easy to read it all out. He seemed to be very, very concerned about his livelihood. And I don't think we should do anything to cause any shop holder. It says in here that there's a chance that he may have to sell his shop. So is there any way we can just put a couple of parking places in there for him? Because obviously with a convenience store, I know from my ward that it's like the shopkeepers have said to me, they pull up, they jump in, get what they want, and they're gone. Gone are the days where people do their weekly shop in the local stores. He relies on people just calling in. And it's like he said, if they've got to park 100 yards away, they're not going to come there. So I think really somebody should be looking at that area.
Perhaps the Highways officer will come in with this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. It's awful difficult sometimes to actually provide car parking spaces exactly in the places where people would want them. I note from reading the report that there was one objection, and that was actually the shopkeeper. From our standpoint, from a highway standpoint, and from a sustainability standpoint, these shopping centres which are located in communities, my view is that primarily people should walk to these places. I can see that the shopkeepers themselves would want parking spaces immediately outside the shops, and it's not unusual for residents to want to park exactly in front of their properties, for shopkeepers to want car parking spaces immediately adjacent to their premises, but it's not always possible. What they did as part of this was they did, I mentioned it earlier, Bronavon did a big community exercise, and talking to the people through their proposals, and through that exercise they managed to secure an additional probably 7 or 8 parking spaces in that particular area. I know they are not where that shopkeeper would want to see them, but the walking distance between those spaces and the shop is not far at all. It is the same distance as it is from the community centre car park. So whilst I can see that a shopkeeper would want spaces outside their property, sometimes it's not possible to be able to do that. But then you look at the next best thing that you could probably do there. So, you know, from a highway standpoint, awful difficult. From a development standpoint, difficult, because you've got to look at the development that you've got in front of you, and the development is for the development of an area which is an ex-public house, and the informal nature of the parking that used to go on there in any event previously. And as I said, there is alternatives being provided. They didn't have to provide it, but they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. You want to come back, Gwen?
Yes, please. Yeah, the thing is with this gentleman, right, I don't like the idea that there's a chance that he may have to close his shop. Now, don't get me wrong, I know the area. I have actually been in that pub. I did deliver when I had a bread delivered to the shop what he's talking about. But surely if it was a new build, new plans have gone in, surely something could have been done to just give a little place there. People don't like walking today. It's a fact of life. People won't walk shops. Yeah, I agree, they should. We had to. We didn't have a car. We had to go and do our man shopping. But I think something should have been done to put either 1 or 2 parking places in there. Now, he says you're 100 yards. Look, would you walk 100 yards to go and get back to fags? People don't do it today. It's a fact of life. But I really think that that's the only thing the only grievance I got against is reading through all this report. I think there should have been something there for that one shop. He should be glad there's 11 people or 11 houses being filled with people. It's more trade for him. But obviously he got a genuine concern. You know what I mean? So I don't know.
Claire, do you want to come back in now?
Yeah, sorry,
Thank you.
you're asking for them to make some provision. Well, that's exactly what they're doing. They're providing 7 new spaces on land adjacent to the shops that they're not required to do as part of the development that's being proposed. So on that basis, if the application goes beyond what it needs to do to satisfy the parking requirements, I think it would be very difficult to say that based on what the one shopkeeper is saying, he's concerned that he's losing the spaces that people use at the moment, which is obviously the car park to the pub, which is closed. Clearly, those spaces will be lost because that space will now be used by residents of the proposed new buildings. But to be fair to Bronavon, they recognised that as part of their pre-application engagement, that it was an issue for those local shopkeepers. So as part of this application, they are proposing 7 possibly 8, depending on what they get on site, but we're accepting 7 at the moment on an area of open space to the side of the shops as almost as mitigation to those shopkeepers. They don't have to do it from a planning point of view. They are proposing that as part of the development. I think that's to be supported from a planning point of view, because they recognise that that is an issue, and they have gone some way to try and address that in their submission to us.
Yeah, I agree. I can see it in here what he said now, but this gentleman has turned around and said that they're going to be used. They're not going to be for the shop. They're going to be used for the doctor's surgery, and they're also going to be used for street residents. You know yourself, if there's a gap, somebody will get in there. Like I spent all day cleaning up the snow. When I turned my back, somebody pulled into my parking place. I know what you're saying, right? And I know it's a fact of life today, but it's like this gentleman is saying, or this lady is saying, that the street residents will find a gap, they'll be in there. Doctor surgery, they're going to be in there. Car comes along, wants to park in the fags, where's he going to go? Down to the next shop. I think it's...
So you also have to be mindful that these are potentially 11 new properties on the doorstep of that shop, and you wouldn't need to drive from these dwellings to those shops for those services. So whilst I can understand the gentleman being concerned, nobody likes change. Change always brings some impact. I think we have to balance the fact that they are providing replacement parking to mitigate against the spaces that are currently being used but will be lost. But there's a new custom potentially being brought to that site, which maybe the shopkeeper hasn't had the impact of because they're not there at the moment. But potentially there's 11 new units and occupiers of those units, which will hopefully bring trade to those very, very local shops.
Let's hope so.
Thank you, Claire. Steve, you want to come in?
Only to reiterate what was just said. Right opposite where those new spaces are proposed is a community hall which is used for various events, and this parking is taken up by the people who come to there as well. So it's an extra burden besides the doctors, besides the people going to the shops, and the people going to there. It is absolutely gridlocked at times. You can't park anywhere. So I think that's just going to be even more parking spaces for anybody just to abandon their car to walk home. So.
Anyone else want to come in? No more questions? Stuart? Proposing what, Stuart? You're proposing the officer's recommendation. There's a seconder for that. You all ready to vote? Those for the application? 1, 2, 3. I think that's unanimous. Anyone against? Any abstentions? No. This application has been approved. Thank you. And that concludes the planning committee for today. Thank you for your attendance, the officers and members.